So blockchain is at its core is about providing transparency of a supply chain, right? It's about building trust between two entities of a transaction. Having been in marketing, and I worked at Unilever for many years, one of the big issues towards the end of my time there was the media buying supply chain, which used to be a fairly seamless process, kind of client, agency, publisher, or television network, or website. One data source, usually Nielsen for television or MRI for print. And with digital, you now have more middle players, but then especially with programmatic now, you have a slew of ad tech players in the middle. And they're all necessary, in their own right, whether it's for viewability or for preventing fraud or detecting fraud. Ad servers, SSPs, DSPs, they're, to make the programmatic landscape complete, they are required. However, there's several issues with that, one of which is the transparency aspect of it, which is that marketers don't necessarily know who all those players are. Secondly, they don't know how much money is going to those players in what would be called production costs in the old days. So the working media, what used to be 85 cents on the dollar to hit the publisher, which ultimately reaches consumers, is now down to 30 or 40 cents. And then lastly, because there's so many data sources providing different performance numbers, delivery, so to speak, you have massive discrepancies in every single media buy. So what used to be on occasion you get some discrepancies, you might have some make goods, usually in flight. Now you have multiple discrepancies. They happen. They don't get identified till after the flight's over, and it takes weeks and months to solve that. And you have multiple people working on that, which obviously both client and agency would prefer to have those people working on better, more strategic stuff. So that's really what blockchain provides for the advertising world is the kind of a unified truth, the view of truth, one unified version of the truth, and a transparency throughout the system. So earlier this year, we built a blockchain for Unilever, which is where I used to work. Again, having worked there and then having worked here, when you work at IBM, you get to understand those types of technologies, AI, blockchain, kind of more advanced, newer technologies in much more detail and much more depth than you would at any other kind of company except, other tech companies. And having really understood it at its core, I was like, wow, this is built for the exact kind of thing we were trying to solve in my last job. So I contacted my old team and I said, let's just take a look at this. We'll see. It's got potential here for potentially helping solve some of the issues. We did a design thinking workshop. We built a blueprint. Ultimately, we built an MVP, minimal viable product, to test out whether or not this can really help solve it. And so after that, and it was a very small kind of MVP, so that it was singular players, some of it done manually. And what we did find was nothing groundbreaking or earth-shattering, but we did find that it could solve for some of the exact issues that we were talking about, especially on the discrepancy part and the transparency part. So Unilever agreed to go to phase 2 and build this out and scale it a little bit. And so I looked at multiple ways to do that, one of which was to possibly do it through a holding company, so some of their clients. We looked at potentially doing it through a DSP. But what became kind of the ultimate for me would be a partnership that we ended up striking with Mediaocean. So I had a lunch with the CEO, Bill Wise. Mediaocean, if you're not aware, is connected to the entire media buying system. It's integrated with all the way from planning to buying to executing. All the ad tech players are integrated. The DSPs, the SSPs, through to the invoicing are all integrated into this system already. And so the partnership has them building their system on IBM's Hyperledger Fabric, the Hyperledger blockchain. And so rather than having to go individually to all of those companies to have them participate, we kind of have them in the ecosystem already and already integrated. So it's just the blockchain part is kind of the platform underneath all of it, which is what we build. We build enterprise blockchains. You'll hear a lot of blockchain companies popping up that do very specific things, whether it's payment or reconciliation or identity, whatever. We build the enterprise solution as we do in many other ways. So this is, for me, a really big kind of a step forward in the media buying world in that we're doing this POC. We have multiple brands as part of it that will launch in July. Unilever is obviously doing the continuation of theirs. We have Kimberly-Clark, we have Kellogg, we have Pfizer, and we have our own IBM brand as well as a few others. to really build the networks. So we have the marketers, we have the publishers that are integrated, and we have all the ad tech system. And we're building out this POC for the back half of this year, and we will really see in much more scale terms the kind of impact blockchain can have on this industry. Well, currently it doesn't necessarily disrupt. What it will do is solve some issues over time, certainly. Those who don't provide real value or are untrustworthy within that supply chain will get disrupted. They'll be identified, they will be called out, and they will either be eliminated or proven redundant or overpaid, and it will be paid less. So that's something we'll find out over time. So basically this issue was much bigger a year and a half, 18 months, 2 years ago, right? That's when you really heard all the biggest CMOs, the Keith Weeds, Mark Pritchard on stage talking about this is a devastating blow to digital advertising, we're gonna move. And so since then, there have been many solutions along the way. In fact, some of the players in that ad tech system came about because of viewability issues and other issues, bots and things like that. And ad.text is one of the solutions I think that's really helpful to find provenance of impressions and websites. But blockchain is all of that at a higher kind of level. It's really about, and I think you talked to Jason earlier, it doesn't have to be about any one industry. Any industry that has a transaction, blockchain will be able to provide transparency and a single version of the truth for that. In fact, our CEO says that blockchain will do for transactions what the internet did for communications. And think about what a big statement that is. Think about how much impact that will have on transactions across the board. I think the technology and how we're approaching that is in the very early days. It's the first inning, I like to say, as a ex-ball player. And you and I know in the early days of digital, when we were there in the 90s, there were many things we knew could be done, but until the technology caught up with businesses and consumers, you couldn't necessarily do it. So for example, video, we were all fired up because we knew we can now take video and put it online, and we can make ads that run on the internet, and we can make content and so forth. But when no one had broadband, that was kind of irrelevant. You could make it, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. And sometimes you have to wait it out, and it has to even that. So I think in some cases we're at that stage with blockchain, and part of the reason for these MVPs and this POC and the pilots are to test what can and can't be done. Push the limits to where we can go. Technology will help catch up when businesses start using it to solve some of the issues they have. You know how it works. Entrepreneurs come to play, and technology comes about in a way that can help at a much more scalable level.